What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And join me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
It is a sad day to talk football right now based on some news that we've gotten in the last 20 minutes or so before the show. Couple running backs hurt, one that we now know is going to be on IR, another who plays on Thursday and might miss that game. Who knows? We're going to have to pay attention to the practice participation all week here. But yeah, Harmon, that's the fun part of this job, right? Trying to react to this stuff on the fly. And we've gotten a couple things here that we got to hit right off the top.
No, this is the worst part of the job. The worst part of the job is talking about injuries and your takes just melting away because of injuries, things that are completely out of your control. That's the worst part of the job. But yes, we do have to try to figure this out on the fly because we're going to get to all of our traditional segments here on the show. It's the People's Panic Meter. It is the waiver wire editions, which are becoming more and more important as we go on here because, as Boone mentioned, we're getting injuries left, right, and center so far this season. We're going to get to all of that, but before we do have two big pieces of breaking news to go through. If you're watching with us live right now, shout out to you guys on the YouTube channel. If you're listening later, we are literally figuring this out right as we are launching the live show here at 5 p.m. Eastern. Starting with a piece of news, unfortunate, out of L.A., Jim Harbaugh told reporters today he announced that Chargers rookie running back Omarion Hampton is going to be placed on injured reserve due to an ankle injury. Don't know how long he will be out, Boone, but he is going to miss at least the next 4 games for the LA Chargers. Man, I'm bummed about this, bro, because not only does this stink for Omarion Hampton, obviously, and I'm going to let you do the fantasy analysis on this, but I got all jacked up about the Chargers offense to start this season. And of course, it's the same old Chargers. One thing after another. Here we are with the LA Chargers. We're down Joe Alt at left tackle. Rashawn Slater is a distant memory at the other tackle position. They've had injury issues on the interior. The offensive line is a shell of itself. And now we're without a guy that looked like a really, really good running back in Omarion Hampton. So, Boone, what is the fallout from this piece of devastating news for the Chargers?
Well, I will say, when we got this news before the show, I had to pick a shirt to wear, and I went with the lightest blue I could find to try to match the Chargers jerseys. That tells you how bad I feel about this. I have some dynasty teams that are just decimated by this one. It's awful. It is terrible news for a young player who early in the season, we weren't sure whether he was going to come on. We were waiting for that breakout, and then the breakout came, and it was unfortunate that it occurred with another injury, Najee Harris getting hurt, right? So now these guys are down to their third string back. And we don't have a clear guy who's up next here. There's Kamani Vidal. There's Hassan Haskins. These guys aren't stars, right? Everyone got excited about Kamani Vidal last year. He really didn't do much with his opportunities. And that was when he was going up against guys like Gus Edwards at that point in the season. Gus Edwards was a shell of his former self. So I don't feel very confident that either of these guys are going to be able to step up and give us huge fantasy value, especially because, like you mentioned, the offensive line is just decimated now with injuries, and it just keeps getting worse week after week. And I don't know how this happens every year to the Chargers, but they fooled us again, Harmon. They drew us in. They made us think that they were going to be this great fantasy factory this season. And now one by one, we're just watching everybody on that offense get hurt. So moving forward, I mean, Hampton, you're going to hold him. He's going to come back later in the season. He already showed us what he can do. He could be a star in the second half of the year when he gets back. So you throw him in your IR spot, and you hope that you can stay competitive until then. In terms of picking somebody else up here, though, we're going to take shots on all these guys. I will put a little more down on Kamani Vidal because I think it's one of those situations where he doesn't necessarily get as much playing time because he's not a special teams guy, where Hassan Haskins is the special teams guy. So I think he's going to step in, and we've seen this happen in a couple backfields recently, most recently with Michael Carter in Arizona, where he wasn't playing, and then when you have some injuries, he vaults ahead and he ends up being the starter. I think there's a chance that happens with Kamani Vidal here, but regardless, I'm just not really excited about either of these guys for fantasy. You look at it and you figure Kamani Vidal is going to be an RB3 flex option, pretty volatile one at that, and then Hassan Haskins being a risky flex. But do you see this any better, any more rosy than I do, Harmon? Because right now it just seems all bad.
No, it does seem all bad. I want to go back to the poll that we asked our YouTube chat here, because that was just perfect here. We asked everyone in the YouTube chat right now, who are you trying to pick up from this Chargers running back room? The number one leader with 46% of the votes is nobody. I'm just coping. So I think that's the right answer here, brother, because I don't really see one of these guys as the clear winner. They didn't have a ton of drives without Amari Hampton, but in the fourth quarter, just 2 drives, I believe it was. Kamani Vidal, 60% of the snaps, which, as you mentioned, is not always an indicator, right? That was a deal with Amari DiMercato for the Arizona Cardinals. Like, well, he played a lot. Obviously, he's going to be the guy. No, he was not the guy. It was Michael Carter. So that doesn't necessarily indicate anything. But 60% of the snaps for Kamani Vidal, 40% for Hassan Haskins. They split the touches quite literally down the middle. 50% for Kamani Vidal, 50% for Hassan Haskins. And Kamani Vidal was the one who got the inside the 2-yard line touch. So which is kind of what you would think. Hassan Haskins, bigger back, goal line hammer. He's got familiarity obviously with Jim Harbaugh and these guys dating back to the Michigan days. So I think this looks like it's just going to be a straight up committee on an offense that's now trending down. Like if this was an offense that was operating like it was in the first 2.5 sort of games of the season, 3 weeks of the season, I'd be a little bit more interested in taking my shots on one of these 2 guys and just saying, hey, hopefully Vidal or Haskins lands as the lead back. But this offensive line is falling apart at the seams. Even last week in yesterday's game with the Commanders, they've got guys coming in and out. Like this is not the offensive line we were banking on it being. And because of that, it's just another reason to kind of be pessimistic about where this team is right now, because you think they could just go rather pass heavy, but shoot, no idea if that's going to work with the offensive line in the state that it's in right now.
Yeah, I do think the one thing to note here too is that the matchup that's coming up in week 6 is absolute perfection. They're getting that Dolphins defense that just gave up the monster game to Rico Dowdle. So we would have seen Amari Hampton maybe set the rushing record in the NFL, the single game record, maybe.
That sucks.
I mean, that defense has been so bad this year. They've given up 97 scrimmage yards or more to every starting running back they've faced. And then obviously the most recent one, as they continue to crumble, was against Rico Dowdle when he just absolutely goes off for over 200 yards. So someone is probably going to put up okay stats. I don't think anyone's going to come near 200 scrimmage yards, but someone is probably going to put up some usable numbers for fantasy, at least in this game. And yet, like I said, I don't feel confident projecting it at all. Yeah. It'll probably be a committee, and we're probably looking at RB3 flex kind of options, even in a matchup that's that great.
All right, let's get to the other piece of news that was breaking here truly as we just fired the mics up. That is that Saquon Barkley is not participating in practice here with a knee injury on Monday. Obviously, we wouldn't normally care about a Monday practice, but they play on Thursday. So this is something that is worth paying attention to here, Boone. It was funny in the aftermath of the game. We had a great breakdown about this game with Joel Smith yesterday on the recap show. But the one thing I think we maybe didn't touch on was the fact that, yeah, they went 80% passing rate in this game yesterday. Meanwhile, Saquon Barkley barely touches the ball. And I thought Barkley had a funny note about this after the game. He's like, well, you guys are upset when I'm touching the ball too much, and now you're upset that I'm not getting, like, nobody's ever happy with this Eagles offense, which is just kind of the state of where this team is right now, which is maybe a bigger picture conversation. But thoughts on this Barkley injury here as we're recording this on Monday evening?
Well, we're not going to panic too much. This is the Panic Meter Show. We're not going to panic and overreact even to a guy missing a Monday practice when it's a Thursday game. We're going to watch this, see if news comes out, see what he can do in practice tomorrow. But we're going to be paying attention, and we have some time here before waivers process because the Eagles players are locked. They played on Sunday. You can't do any sneaky moves and go pick anybody up. They're not coming off a bye or anything like that. But this is another backfield where before the season, I felt fairly confident that it was going to be Will Shipley who was going to be the number 2 back, the guy that would step in. And now I think this might be more of a committee in a backfield and behind an offensive line that isn't as strong as we thought it was going to be before the season. So right now, I think A.J. Dillon and Will Shipley are going to factor in. A.J. Dillon, even with Will Shipley coming back from that rib injury, A.J. Dillon has gotten more work over the last week or two. So yeah, I think both these guys will be involved, and that kind of renders them, both a little less exciting for fantasy, puts them down into that RB3 flex range probably as well. I think based on the matchup, I'd probably put them a little bit lower even than I would the top Chargers guy, Kamani Vidal, this week, just because I think that Dolphins matchup is so juicy and the Eagles rushing attack has not given us what we expected having Barkley out there. So not having Barkley out there and going to some form of a committee isn't that exciting either. I'd love to see them, though, hand this to Shipley and let him step into that lead back role, because when healthy, I think he's really flashed. We know what A.J. Dillon is, right? A.J. Dillon's going to get what's blocked for him. He can be that goal line hammer potentially, but I don't even think he's that great in that kind of role. Let's see Shipley get out there and do some things, assuming, though, that he is completely over that rib injury and they can let him loose. That would be the best case scenario fantasy-wise, because if he got all the work, I would be much more excited about him potentially flirting with RB2 numbers for fantasy. But I do think this is going to be another committee.
I think so too, and that is pretty brutal for a team that we were showing the stats earlier. Some of the players who have rushed for more yards than Saquon Barkley. Barkley's 22nd in the NFL in rushing yards, despite playing a higher rate of his team's snaps than almost more than any other running back so far this year. He's third in terms of percentage of team snaps right now, and yet he's 22nd in the NFL in rushing yards, 3.2 yards per carry. This is a rushing ecosystem that we expected to be one of the best in the NFL, and it's just flat out not been. They're 16th in yards before contact per running back rush attempt. Overall, they're just not creating the same lanes with the offensive line. 41% success rate for Saquon Barkley so far this season, as Marcus Mosher notes here. This is third worst among qualifying running backs this year. So it'd be one thing if we were taking a Will Shipley, A.J. Dillon, Tank Bigsby, whatever kind of combination and throwing them behind the 2024 Eagles offensive line. We're not doing that right now. So this is another situation, Boone, where I might let other people kind of chase on the waiver wire. And if we're like throwing out high priority bids or fab or whatever, I don't know that I see a real answer here, just mostly because the environment's not what we wanted it to be.
Yeah, agreed. And unless we hear news that this is going to be a longer term injury, which right now we don't even know if he's going to miss this game. So this whole conversation might be for naught. But unless we found out that this was going to be a longer term injury, I don't think you need to get too crazy bidding on really any of the guys that we've talked about off the top here. And I would say the same, like we saw what happened with the Cardinals backfield this week, where they come out, they have one good game and a good matchup, but now the schedule is going to get a lot harder for them. And I don't know that you're going to get a ton of value from that backfield. So last week, I wasn't recommending that people go out and bid like crazy to get them. Michael Carter was somebody you could sneakily just pick up during the week, get him on your roster, throw him on your bench, see how it played out, and you might have gotten a start out of him. But moving forward, he's not necessarily somebody you're going to be that excited about either. So you got to be careful with your FOB budget, right? You want to make sure that you're using it in good spots. If your team is crushed and you're trying to just eke out a win, that's one thing. But if you're in a good spot, if you have a winning record, you want to try to save that budget in order to pick up somebody who's going to help you potentially win in the postseason and get you to that championship. So yeah, I wouldn't go crazy on any of these players.
All right. Well, with that, let's keep the bad vibes rolling here in the aftermath of Week 5. It is time to fire up the post-Week 5 People's Panic Meter.
Would you say it's time for everyone to panic? Yes, I would, Kent.
Oh, my God. Okay, it's happening. No. Wait. Everybody stay calm. Stay calm. What's the procedure? Stay calm.
Reminder, the Panic Meter is presented by Dentech, protecting your teeth from fantasy stress, one matchup at a time. For the new folks here, if you're first time watching the show, listening, we appreciate the hell out of you. Here is how the Panic Meter works. We have 4 tiers of panic on the meter. We have no panic, some panic, total panic, and the coping corner. The coping corner means if you get placed there, you're not panicking about this player anymore. You're accepting the reality. It is what it is. Before we get to your email submissions here, fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com if you want to submit to the People's Panic Meter every single week. 2 players are in the coping corner right now. Let's do a little check-in on one guy in particular. Isaiah Pacheco, he's playing tonight. We're recording this on Monday. We don't know what he's going to do. But Calvin Ridley, just like he did last year, Boone, as soon as we put him in the damn coping corner, he comes out and has his best performance of the season. 10 targets, despite being banged up, catches 5 for 131. And I will say looked pretty good doing it. So What do we think about the Calvin Ridley coping corner status? Are we already ready to capitulate and say sorry and take him out of the coping corner, or do we want to leave him in there for a little while longer?
I think I'm willing to leave him in there and make him show it to us again. And it's more than just he was banged up, right? Like his practice participation last week, he comes out of the week before. They say that he had an in-game injury. He goes DNP limited. He's questionable for the game. So you figure he hasn't produced this year. He's going into the weekend banged up. There's no possible way this is going to be the game that he comes out and crushes it. And he looks better than he has all season. Like, it's the frustrating part of trying to project these games, right? But I'm not willing to just completely reverse course after one performance. I think we need to see it from him. This is the player that we thought we were getting when we were drafting him earlier, right? In the summer, we thought we were getting a guy that was going to see that kind of volume. This is the first time that he's gotten double-digit targets this year. And yeah, I mean, the whole offense had some better moments this week, but I think we need to see it from them more than just once before we actually pull him out of the coping corner, because I'm not so sure that you feel that great about putting him in your lineup right now. So prove it to us, Calvin Ridley. We need it one more week before we decide to pull you out.
That's very few. One participation for Calvin Ridley. So much for the injury. I do think that Joel made a really good point on the show yesterday, where this opening slate was always going to be brutal for the Titans offense. Broncos, Rams, Colts, Texans, and then we get to Cardinals, which is probably the softest spot so far on that schedule, which predictably Ridley comes through with the best pass-catching performance for any Titans player all season. And now we get Raiders, Patriots, Colts again, Chargers. I mean, there's definitely the Chargers defense has been good before the Week 10 bye. So it's not like a clean run out here for Ridley, but I'm willing to be open-minded, but I agree with you. I want to see it. I want to see it 2 games in a row before taking him out of the coping corner, because I don't want to take him out and then we're getting email submissions about Calvin Ridley panic next week.
I think there's a chance that he played so poorly in the opening month that defenses just forgot about him and they weren't even concerned at all. And then he came out and finally had a good game. So let's see, now that they've been reminded he exists, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe drop him onto the back end of your roster if somebody dropped him. I know I did that in one league because I'm a sick freak. So that's probably the way to approach this right now. But all right, let's get into the submissions to the email line here. Again, fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. If you're panicking on Sundays after the games are over, throw those in there. This first one comes in from Ethan. Says, guys, I have so many teams relying on the Ravens. It's looking like it might be 3 weeks before you can get a chance at quality production again. And even then, just pray for a spike week and sell off name value, or hold the line and trust that they'll be elite with Lamar healthy. My faith in the Ravens has been shaken to its core. Me too.
Yeah.
Same goes for me double here on this one. Boone, what's your level of panic on the Ravens right now?
I think you have to go total panic on it. And I wouldn't even be against a discussion about coping corner at this point. Like, they came out this weekend and laid an absolute egg against the Texans. Like, nothing. They brought nothing to the table. They are down so bad. It's injuries on both sides of the ball. Their defense can't stop anybody. Cooper Rush struggled so bad in this game. They're talking about maybe putting Tyler Huntley out there this week. I don't think that would change things very much. I think there's a chance even, and there was a report, I believe, over the weekend about this, that maybe Lamar will try to like push to play this week. He might need to, just to try to like salvage their season. And I think that would be a mistake, because if they put him out there, he's not necessarily going to be 100%. Will he run as much as normal? I don't know that he'll be the same fantasy asset in that game. I don't even know that him being out there saves everything at this point if their defense is going to play the way that it's played. So if you're a fantasy manager with Zay Flowers, with Derrick Henry, you're not feeling great about having these guys in your starting lineup. I know Derrick Henry got there with a touchdown this week, but it's been same old ever since that week 1 game when he looked like the true King Henry. Since then, it is terrible from him. We've talked before about him getting game scripted out of these. That happened again this week. They had Keaton Mitchell active, so now you got another guy that could potentially take on more work. And then Zay Flowers, like, he went over 70 yards in this game, but hasn't found the end zone since week 1. He's just kind of reverted to being like that kind of low ceiling wide receiver 3 type guy, because we got excited in week 1 that, oh my God, he found the end zone. That's what could potentially unlock him here. Now he doesn't have Lamar. He's not finding the end zone. man, it is just bad news all around. I don't think there's anybody else in this offense that you want to really play. Mark Andrews just a touchdown or bust tight end 2 at this point for fantasy. So I am total panic. And I think this team's season could be over before you know it. Like, they got that bye coming up. It makes a lot of sense to hold Lamar out until then. We might not see him until week 8, like the question said. This is going to be terrible for the next couple games here until he gets back. And even then, I don't think the ceiling is the same.
Absolutely brutal. I mean, and I'm with you. I think it is total panic. Some of the run game issues were still present that we have been talking about with Derrick Henry. 2.3 yards per carry on their running back runs in this game. 7th highest stuff rate among the teams that have played so far. So the run game is not turning around. And yeah, playing Lamar Jackson in week 6 would be a mistake because they play the Rams this week. Like that's a situation where you're going to put him behind an offensive line that hasn't played great so far this year against that pass rush. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but they lose this game. They fall to 1-5, which would be brutal. So I understand Lamar is going to try to push to play, but week 7 bye, the only reason I'm not going to go full coping corner here, Boone, is because they come back from that bye. Immediately they get the Bears and the Dolphins. Like, those are 2 spots where they should be able to bounce back against those defenses before then playing the Vikings and the Browns. But like, there's a game against the Jets in week 12, the Bengals 2 times between weeks 13 and 15. There are still spots from a fantasy perspective where I think this offense can give you something, but I do think we are at a complete panic level with this team, especially for this week. I feel pretty bad.
It's just what a fall from grace after week 1 when we saw them go up against the Bills, and what an incredible matchup that was. And they looked like one of the best offenses in the league. We thought this was going to be a magical season for them. You wondered whether, okay, I know they lost that game, but can they potentially go on this year? They looked like they were right up there with the Bills. Could they go on and actually get over the hump and win the Super Bowl this season? And regardless, along the way, Lamar, I said at one point, I thought I was totally wrong, that Lamar looked like the best fantasy quarterback, that he was a much better fantasy quarterback than Josh Allen. He was outproducing him by a couple points per game. And yet now I just think that entire ceiling gets lowered, and it's awful. And this is why injuries are the worst.
This is why injuries are the worst. All right, next one comes in from Jake L, who sends, I'll cut to the chase. J-Mo is running wind sprints like he's training for the 1,500-meter dash. How can the Lions earnestly commit $87 million to this man, yet ignore him on game day? What are we missing? And give me one reason why we shouldn't put him in the coping corner. This is Jake from State Farm. Shout out to Jake from State Farm for listening to the podcast. Yeah, I mean, let's just put some numbers behind this. Jameson Williams has 21 targets through 5 weeks of the season. That is fewer than CeeDee Lamb, who hasn't played in a couple weeks. That is fewer than Sterling Shepard. That is fewer than Hunter Renfrow. That is fewer than Kendrick Bourne. That is fewer than Trey Tucker. That is fewer than Josh Downs, who doesn't even play all the snaps. It's the same amount as Jalen Naylor. It is the same amount of targets as Marvin Mims. It's the same amount as undrafted free agent for the Cleveland Browns, who, again, has not even played all the games, Isaiah Bond. That's what we're talking about in terms of the targets for Jameson Williams, and he has caught 11 passes on those 21 targets. That is despite having a 41.3% share of the air yards for this team. I actually think there's some real argument for the coping corner here, Boone, but it's a talented player. Where do you fall down on this one?
First off, I wanted to bring in the like Simpsons meme there, like the stop it, he's already dead, as you were listing off those names. So like, you went a little far on that. You didn't have to go that far. Crush him.
I didn't have to go to Hunter Renfrow. That was probably uncalled for, but regardless.
I'm total panic. Absolutely. I'm listening to coping corner. I mean, if you want to put a positive spin on it, you could say, okay, Jared Goff, we know he's not normally good outdoors. They've played 3 of their 5 games outdoors. You know, one of the 2 indoor games that they played was against the Browns defense, which is a pretty tough matchup. You know, the fact that he's only top 45 yards in 1 game so far, it happened in the right environment when they were at home on the fast track in a better matchup. I mean, he's certainly fallen down into that boomer bust wide receiver 3 flex range, maybe even lower, probably wide receiver 4 flex range at this point. The ceiling is still high, and we saw it in week 2. When he hits big, but how often is he going to hit big? And you and I talked about it in the summer, right? That there was a lot of hands that were going to be asking for the ball in this offense, and how were they going to be able to keep everybody happy and to keep everybody producing for fantasy? And the answer is they aren't. That the top guys are going to be fine. Amon-Ra St. Brown's good. That Jahmyr Gibbs is good. In the best matchups, David Montgomery comes through. He finds the end zone. And then the other guys, Sam Laporta and J-Mo, and we're even seeing Alec Tesla get involved and, score some touchdowns, make some big catches. These other guys are just kind of here and there having big games. And that's what J-Mo's been reduced to. And I have the same questions that, the person who wrote in does, that why did they give him all this money if this is the way it was going to go, especially when we heard so many positive things about Isaac Tesla before the season. And I thought, okay, this is a sign that they're going to let J-Mo walk at the end of the contract and they're going to just find someone else. And instead they paid him and they're not getting their money's worth. And, you look at the schedule, I don't know that I see that much hope here, right? Because it's the Chiefs in week 6 on the road, the Bucks at home. That could be a spot where you could use them in your lineup. Then it's a bye. Then we have the Vikings, the Eagles, the Packers, 3 of the next 5 after the bye. Those don't look like the best spots. I'm keeping them total panic. I don't think I want to put them in coping corner. I think there's still a chance, down the stretch with some easier matchups. He gets the Cowboys, he gets the Steelers. There's some games indoors. He plays week 14, 15, 16 indoors. Maybe he comes through at that point in the season, but man, you can't really put him in your lineup other than really good matchups like that Bucks one.
Yeah, I think I'm with you that I don't know that we can go full coping corner yet. There's just a lot of negative signs here, particularly about the role that he is in right now. And, this is not to pat myself on the back or anything, but the argument that Amon-Ra St. Brown was going to be the guy that, lost because of Ben Johnson, because he's a guy that gets schemed open. It's Jameson Williams is the guy that got schemed open in this offense last year. He was the one who was most sensitive to Ben Johnson leaving. And we've seen so far this year, his slot snaps are down 19.9% from 30% last year. His average depth of target is an obnoxiously high 20.3 when it was 17. That's yards per reception. His air yards per target, 20.8. So higher than the yards per catch average depth of target. It was 11.4 last year. So he's getting targets farther down the field, which are not coming through. He has a 10% drop rate, which again, if you're getting fewer targets than damn Hunter Renfrow, you got to catch all of them. You can't drop 2 of them because that's going to be a problem. So we need coming into this week, I was we need those air yards per target to come down. And instead just the targets went down for Jameson Williams. So it's a talented player that the team is very invested in. Obviously, from a financial perspective, what Dan Campbell has said about him being a team guy and opening things up, I don't know what else to say other than it won't always be this bad. But he has been as volatile as you could possibly be throughout the course of this season so far. And, there's still a very successful offense while that is the case.
And some of those names that you mentioned, how much more valuable is he for fantasy than a Trey Tucker right now? There's not that much difference. Yes, sure, J-Mo, the ceiling maybe is higher, I guess, but Trey Tucker has one of the best fantasy weeks of the year for a receiver, right? He had a huge game. So there's, it's really, I think that people were talking themselves into him potentially taking a step forward. And you and I pinpointed that in the summer, that how was that going to happen? And who was it going to be at the expense of? And he didn't. He didn't take a step forward in terms of carving out a bigger role, because there just isn't a bigger role to be carved out at the moment. So without some sort of injury, I don't see this changing for him. And he just ends up being that kind of, risky, volatile wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 flex kind of play.
Yeah, I think if you're giving yourself an out here, his route tree, from a percentage standpoint, doesn't look all that different from what it was last year. So maybe they just need to kind of recalibrate where his targets are coming from. But I don't know. Definitely one of those guys you have to tell yourself a narrative and a story. It's not quite in the data right now why things are going to turn around here for Jameson Williams. Next one comes in from Anthony N. Hey, I'm not necessarily in panic, but I would like y'all's opinion on RJ Harvey. Why does Sean Payton love Tyler Bidet so much. Also, how bad is the Eagles offensive coordinator? Because I can't stand to watch this offense every week while I have Jalen Hurts. Real quick on the Jalen Hurts thing, I don't know if I want to do a full deep dive on this just because it's a complicated question, but do we have any panic on Jalen Hurts himself or this Eagles offense? Because I'm with Anthony's point here that I don't like watching this offense either right now.
Yeah, I think the offense, we could make an argument for total panic, but Hurts, it's only some panic for me, right? He's the QB4 on the season. I mean, how can you be that worried about him, right? Like, I don't love watching the offense either. You don't necessarily have to, just because it's your fantasy team. You don't have to watch all the games. You and I have to watch all the games, but everybody else doesn't have to watch all the games.
They are on Thursday night this week, so
just
we're stuck with them.
So use it. Have a night. Go hang out with your family or your friends. Maybe don't watch this one if you're upset about having him on your team. But regardless, I mean, he's finished as a top 15 fantasy quarterback 4 times so far. 2 of those were in the top 10. One of them was top 2. Like, at least 19 fantasy points in 4 of his 5 games. That's not crushing your team, right? Like, you can still win with your quarterback doing that. It's pretty good production. He's not having maybe as many spike games, but it's still early in the season and they're still figuring some things out. I mean, you could panic about this, being so clunky, but overall, I think he's still going to get his. So it's only some panic for me on him.
Yeah, I think that's right. I have Jalen Hurts on a couple of fantasy teams, and I'm not loving the vibes around the Eagles right now.
For sure.
From a stats perspective, I don't even know how much of it is the offensive coordinator versus just, again, like I said, the vibes right now. But that is a deeper conversation that we don't have quite enough time for here, nor do we have all the information on what is going on with this Eagles team right now. But I agree. I'm not going to sit here and just be like, well, they're winning games. Like, come on. I mean, at some point we got to put the pedal to the metal here and be serious. And we're not going to do that with what we've seen so far from the Eagles offense. But let's talk about RJ Harvey here. Do you have any panic on RJ Harvey?
This one's kind of surprising because I know the matchup was really good a couple weeks ago, but he's 1 week removed from having 108 scrimmage yards and a touchdown. Like, how fast things turn, right? And I know this week, like, game plan wise, I guess they just thought they were going to use other guys a little bit more and he wasn't as involved. I suppose, like, the matchup this week was very tough. They went from playing the Bengals in week 4 to playing the Eagles in week 5. That's like 2 complete opposite ends when you're talking about allowing points to running backs and how strong those defenses are. So I think that factors in a lot of it here. To me, I guess this also, and I struggle with this when we're talking about the panic meter, because to me, I'm not really surprised. I think early in the season, we said that J.K. Dobbins was going to be the lead back and that eventually Harvey would carve out a role. And we've seen some things from him. He looks more than capable out there when he does get touches. So I think that's very positive. And then you just kind of have to wait and see, does he come on at some point in the season? Or is he that one injury away guy? And again, I factored that into his fantasy outlook for the year because he's a one injury away guy behind a running back that's like the ultimate running back who's going to get hurt, right? The guy with like the most durability concerns in J.K. Dobbins, who every season of his career, he's gotten hurt at some point. So I hate to say it because he's having a great season, but I'm more worried about J.K. Dobbins eventually breaking down and handing over this backfield to Harvey than I am about Harvey's fantasy outlook, because right now I think he's doing what we expected. He can be a flex play for you until he eventually carves out that bigger role or until he gets vaulted into the starting lineup because Dobbins gets hurt. So I don't really have that much panic on this one. And I think I really have no panic about Harvey. I think he's doing what I expected from before the season.
Yeah, I feel like it could be some panic just because it's like, how long are we going to wait on this thing? I know it's only week 5, yet I think what's disappointing for folks is that we saw in week 4, 33 snaps, 35 for J.K. Dobbins, 33 for R.J. Harvey. Tyler Bidet completely removed, 2 snaps in week 3, 8 snaps in week 4, and then boom, he pops back up for 18 and Harvey plays 15. So you kind of want it to be this steady ascension for rookies, and that's obviously not what took place here. He took a step back in week 5, which I think is what has people concerned about him right now. But Boone, isn't this just like the difficulty of doing rankings? And you are the rankings guy, so I'm gonna run this by you here. This is a tough thing about ranking a player like RJ Harvey, who I still think finishes the season by hook or by crook as like a top 20 back, just because young players tend to get opportunity later in the season. I think that's still very much on the table. But it's like, how do you rank that guy going into the season? Because here in the first 5 weeks, people are going to be like, I can't use this guy at all. What am I doing here? But by the end of the season, he might actually have something.
There was a reason too why he was going later than some of the other top backs, right? Even like a Travion Henderson, but he certainly wasn't going as early as like Hampton or Genty. He was going a little bit later. You were getting that discount because we knew there was another capable back in that backfield who, like I said, we talked about in the summer, was going to start the year as the lead back, and that's exactly how it's played out. So you got a bit of a discount on him. This is why, and now you kind of have to wait. Where you drafted him, depending how you drafted, where you drafted him, you might not need to rely on him right now other than just being that kind of flex play once in a while for you. So again, I don't think I'm that worried. I see the talent. He is taking advantage of his opportunities when he gets them. This week was a weird matchup against the Eagles, and I think it might just been a game plan thing, and we'll see how this goes moving forward. But I'm not going to have a ton of panic over a guy that had over 100 scrimmage yards and a touchdown just 2 weeks ago.
I think that's fair enough. All right, next one comes in from Doug W., who sends in TJ Hawkinson. Seems like they only throw to him in the third quarter. Is he needing to block more, or is he just not a good receiver anymore? Pretty close to dropping him for the Jets or Giants tight end. Love the show. Thanks. Hey, we love you, Doug. Appreciate you, buddy. I think TJ Hawkinson kind of makes sense as a coping corner candidate. Like, yeah, I'd much rather have Mason Taylor right now. I don't have any TJ Hawkinson. Like, I'm sure I maybe took him in best ball here or there, but I don't have him in any managed teams. He's averaging 30.6 yards per game. He's scored 1 touchdown, and I don't know what this offense is going to look like as the offensive line continues to get banged up. Tell me the optimistic story on TJ Hawkinson. Where are you at from a panic meter standpoint?
There isn't one. I was going to say total panic, but I think you just tipped me over into coping corner. I think this is a good case for coping corner because, hasn't topped 50 yards in a game this year. Now he's going on bye, so that's probably why the person's writing in with this, right? Doug's trying to figure out what he should do. Does he hold him through the bye or not? And I think you can drop him. I don't know that I'd want to drop him for Theo Johnson, but I would drop him for Mason Taylor. I think Mason Taylor's a great guy to pick up right now, and his fantasy stock's headed in a completely opposite direction than Hawkinson, who even coming off the bye is going to have to play the Eagles, which is not a great matchup for him. So, I think you can drop him. This is just not the Vikings offense that we signed up for. All the injuries in the offensive line, the quarterback play hasn't been there. Now you have Jordan Addison back. So you'd think that Hawkinson would have taken advantage of the time when Addison wasn't around. He did not. And so now how is it really going to change that much? He'll be a guy that can be a contributor on the offense. I also wonder too, do you think it's injuries? Like watching him out there, I don't know that he's necessarily moving like the player that he was before the injuries. So you worry whether that's maybe sapping a little bit of it from him too. But overall, yes, I think it's the environment in this offense is not what we thought it was going to be before the season. And Hawkinson is not overcoming that. So if I was Doug, I would drop him for Mason Taylor. And if I was us, I would put him in the coping corner, which we're doing.
Cool. I like it. Yeah, not cool. Stinks for TJ Hawkinson. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but he's third on the team in route participation the last 3 weeks. So it's 87% of the dropbacks he's running a route. So he's not out there like just blocking a ton or anything like that with offensive line injuries. They're still trying to get him involved, and it's just not really working. 0.94 yards per route run the last 2 weeks, 11 targets, 10 catches for 77 yards. He's being targeted on average 2.7 air yards right now. So there's just not a lot of juice in this role. And I think that the more chaos the offense goes through here, Boone, I just think the more targets we're going to get for Justin Jefferson, who has a near 29% target share the last 2 weeks. I think that's just the way this is going to go. And Hawkinson's going to continue to fall behind Jefferson, Addison, etc. So he's a coping corner candidate to me. All right.
I'll say one more thing on that. On the live show on Sunday, I talked about Ashton Genty and having Brock Bowers out and how that was going to get him potentially more involved in the passing game because we were seeing him already get more involved in the passing game the week before. And there tends to be a correlation between a running back and tight end targets. And when one of the starters is out, one of the positions you often see if there's not like a true backup to step in. that someone else, and Aaron Jones is going to come back to this offense, right? So we're going to see like a true receiving back out there again. How is that going to factor in? Because that's another area where Hawkinson hasn't had to deal with Aaron Jones out there recently. So Aaron Jones coming back, I'm just throwing more dirt on Hawkinson here, unfortunately, as we put him in Goping Corner.
Yeah, I mean, you really buried him on that one. If we want to bury somebody else, Adam Thielen, 5.5 yards per game the last 2 weeks. So cool trade by the Vikings before the season. All right, last email we have comes in from Medina. I don't think we have real panic players besides the repetitive ones, A.J. Brown, Chase Brown. What I was thinking is that nobody's talking about Tyron Tracy's comeback from injury. For me, it's obviously Cam Scatterbo is not getting every carry in the game. Even worse, will even be the RB1. I love Scat's playing ability, but it's not a great offense, awful offensive line. The other guy I'm panicking about is Alvin Kamara. To this point, with Miller's snap usage going up every week, it's not crazy to think a trade for Kamara, but that's just a maybe. Right now, he's not the focal point of the offense like past years. That PPR exploit, thanks for reading, and good luck in week 6. Good luck to you as well, Medina. Let's take these one by one. For Alvin Kamara, I mean, Boone, he's kind of banged right now, unless we see him traded, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it with him as just total panic, but it is that one caveat that if he gets traded somewhere, he's probably going to a contender, he's probably going to a good offense, and he's probably going to a place where they need an RB1, and he is going to be the lead back. So if he ends up on the Chiefs or the Bears, like, we're going to get very excited about him for fantasy, I think, and that'll boost his value, and he'll be able to make a push on a contending team. But right now, he looks like a bit of a declining player, like not quite the same as he used to be on an offense where he is clearly sharing the load now with Kendre Miller. Like, Kendre Miller looks like he's got more juice out there in the running game. You look at Kamara's snaps, right? His snap shares dropped every week since week 2, played 86% of the snaps in week 2. This week, all the way down to a season low 56% of the snaps. They're not giving him as many carries, and that's because Miller's been more effective on the ground. Kamara is still getting the passing work, but this is a timeshare, and he's just headed in the wrong direction. And how is this going to turn around unless Kendre Miller gets hurt? I don't think anything changes here. And if anything, if it does change, it might be later in the season, this team deciding that they want the younger guys to get a little more work. They want to get a closer look at them, and they give Kamara even less and let Kendre Miller take over. So there's a lot of paths to Kendre Miller taking on more in this backfield, whether it is a trade, whether it's Kamara being over 30 and getting hurt, or whether it's just the team deciding that they want to get the younger guys more work. So yeah, this is a total panic situation, I think, for Kamara. And we just have to cross our fingers and really hope that trade happens, even though there were the reports that potentially the Saints are going to, look to move some of their veteran guys. And yet one of their best beat writers, Nick Underhill, immediately was like, I don't think Kamara is going to go anywhere. So I don't know that is going to happen. But from everyone's standpoint, maybe Kamara doesn't want to leave New Orleans. But other than that, I think everyone would like to see him go somewhere else and potentially contend and have a little more fantasy value on the way.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Boone just said there. That's pretty much 100% how I feel about the situation. I think Kamara would look great as the check down merchant in the Bears offense. I think he'd look good in that role. Lastly, Medina sent in about Cam Scatterbo. Any panic on Cam Scatterbo, who over the last 2 games has 49 running back opportunities, which is only behind Christian McCaffrey at 59. By the way, yeah, Mr. Calf injury week 1, 59 opportunities the last 2 weeks, and Quinshon Judkins at 50. Any panic on Cam Scatterbo and his massive workload for the Giants right now?
I'm going with some panic, but it's not because of the reason that was mentioned there. It's not because Tyron Tracy is going to be back soon. It's more because of the schedule. Because like you said, like you look at the usage, 13 touches in week 2, came through with 59 and a touchdown, 16 for 121 and a TD in week 3, 27 for 90 in week 4, 21 for 104 in week 5. Like, he's getting an absolute ton of volume. And him and Jackson Dart are basically like the identity of this team now. I don't think they're going away from Scatterbo at all. I think Tyron Tracy will come back in, shave maybe a little bit off the top of Scatterbo, mostly take on those Devin Singletary snaps. But I'm looking at the schedule for them, and they had this matchup that they should have taken more advantage of against the Saints After that, they get the Eagles, the Broncos, the Eagles again, the 49ers, the Bears, which I guess is a slightly easier one, the Packers, the Lions, the Patriots are pretty good against the run. Like, then they have a bye, and they have Washington and Minnesota. Like, how many games in there is this offense without Malik Neighbors, and maybe for the next little while without Darius Slayton, who hurt his hamstring in this game? We'll see what the update is there. How many games are they really going to be crushing and, having positive game scripts? And is Scadaboo going to have a lot of room to work? I don't think it's a great outlook for him in that area. So it ends up making him like a volume-based RB2 for fantasy. And that's where my some panic comes in. It's not the Tyron Tracy's coming back, because there's no way they're giving Tracy back the lead job after the way that Dable has talked about Scadaboo and after the way the teammates seem to feel about Scadaboo. He's the lead back in that offense now.
Yeah, to the point, though, is he going to have 20-plus opportunities every single week? Because he kind of needs to do that, because even in these two games, he's averaging 11.7 half PPR points. So it's like all this opportunity has gone to be the running back 26 on a points per game basis the last 2 weeks. He needs all of that opportunity. And these were two, at least in the Giants game, the Chargers game, they were leading. This was a better matchup against the Saints, to your point. So I think there's a lot of negatives kind of working in Cam Scadaboo in his outlook right now. So maybe based on the meme type player that he is and stuff like that, maybe you could actually flip him in a trade. But I agree that there should be some level of concern, not panicking necessarily, because I still think he's going to be a value based on where you took him, but maybe check in on what the perception is for Cam Scadaboo out there, but definitely not somebody you're totally panicking on, I would say. Real quick before we toss the break.
Less than top 15 wide receiver, top 15 running back kind of value, just based on the volume he's getting. You're not selling cheap. You're not giving anybody a discount on him right now.
100% agree. Before we go to break here, real quick update on Saquon Barkley. Ian Rappaport reports that it's just dealing with soreness is Saquon Barkley. General soreness coming out of the game. Fully expects to play Thursday night against the Giants. So maybe don't totally freak out on the Saquon Barkley stuff. Just wanted to get that update in because we talked about it on the top of the show. But all right, with that, we're going to throw to our first break. When we come back, we'll continue to run through your People's Panic Meter submissions. We'll get into those right after this quick break. All right, we are back. Let's continue to run through your submissions to the People's Panic Meter. Let's get into the social media submissions here. This first one comes in from, of course, we got to talk about this player. Sam I Am says, Lad McConkey. The offensive line has major issues, making Justin Herbert need to get the ball out quickly. Keenan is the usual target on those quick throws, and play-action bootlegs have Quentin Johnson being the hot route. Of course, Lad McConkey finds his way to the end zone, and we're still panicking over Lad McConkey. Hey, I will say we're trending up. We're trending in the right direction. We're back up now to wide receiver 40 in terms of the pen meter here. I've got the pen in my hand, folks. This is it. This is the pen that will be consumed if Lad McConkey is wide receiver 40 on the season. We're back up from wide receiver 55, Boone, so we're trending in the right direction.
I'm looking at this graphic. It says in danger. What are you talking about? You are still in the danger zone here, my friend. I am worried for you. When it comes to our panic meter, nothing's changed for me. I know he scored the touchdown. I am still total panic on this guy. I mean, the offensive line is still banged up. He still has the same target competition that he was dealing with in the weeks prior that led to this whole thing. Like, what has really changed here? I think he's still the same player. It's simple. I mean, we have a dude who isn't topped 50 yards in his last 4 games. So, yeah, it's great that he got a touchdown. It's great that you're positive and you're moving in the right direction here with it. But this is a group effort from this receiving core. And before the season, that's not necessarily what we thought this was going to be. So I think there's still a chance that he could end up down in this range. I think he is a high-end wide receiver 3. You paid top 15 prices for him in the summer. You're not feeling good about that. So that contributes to the total panic. But in terms of the pen danger that you're in, I'd still be pretty worried if I was you.
I'm still a little worried. I want to give a shout out to Amos and Bads, who sent in multiple, both of them sent in follow-ups to the pen episode and the discussion on this whole thing. Amos pointed out it needs to be this pen, which is correct. He said if this pen goes missing, my integrity needs to be question. I'll say it. Sometimes, I mean, there's some bite marks on this thing already because sometimes I just like casually when I type, I'm already getting used to eating it. So whatever. And shout out to Bads who had his whole audio submission sent in on the smoking gun of pen meter. So yeah, 71% of the audience thinks I'm eating this pen.
Oh, wow.
Jeez, Scott. All right, let's move on. I'm also total panic on Ladd McConkey and my insides. All right. Robbie sends in our next submission here. Just says the Arizona Cardinals, Kyler, McBride, all the running backs. I'm sick of the Cardinals. They're the team that's exhausting me the most, Boone. I don't want to talk about them. I don't want to watch them. I don't want to think about them at all.
Yeah.
I'm not even saying words correctly about them. So I don't know. Let's just say Cardinals. Anyone attached to this team, what's the panic level?
I don't think we can do that. I think you have to break it down. Like, it's very different for me. Like, I would go total panic if we're talking about Kyler, if we're talking about the running backs, I'm total panic there. If we're talking about Marv or McBride, it's some panic, but I'm not going off the deep end. Like, those guys are still producing. Marv's had decent outings the last 2 weeks. McBride, you're not getting the elite numbers that you thought you were getting, but he's still producing like one of the best tight ends. We don't really have any tight end that's putting up like absolutely monster numbers. But the thing with Kyler, like I talked about this last week in my buys and sells, I don't really understand. At the time, he was rostered in 92% of leagues, and I was like, what is happening here? Like, the guy's best fantasy finish on the season is QB 16. I think it's just name value at this point that people were like clinging to. And I recommended selling him. And this week, he's actually gone up. He's 93% rostered now, Harmon. Like, I don't understand what people are doing. He didn't have a great game this week either. Like, he'll have some spike weeks eventually here and there. But overall, like, he cannot be a trusted fantasy starter. He's just a player that people believe, I guess, based on some past performances, that he could potentially be that guy. So I would capitalize on whatever remaining name value he has. I would be moving him for anything you can get. Total panic on him. Total panic on the running backs. And I touched on this a bit earlier when we were talking about some of the running back injuries at the top of the show, that Michael Carter comes in this week, has a good game in what was a positive matchup against the Titans defense, comes through, finds the end zone. It gets much more difficult after that, right? Now he gets the Colts, he gets the Packers, and then he gets a bye. That's his next 3 weeks. So he is just a risky RB3 flex option. And I think this is probably the best game of the season that we just saw from him. So keep your expectations in check there. Hold Trey Benson. Trey Benson will be back eventually in the second half of the season. It sounds like this is an injury that he'll be able to get over and come back in the second half of the year fine. And I think he will be a valuable play for fantasy at that point. But yeah, it's total panic on Kyler. It's total panic on the running backs. And then I'm just not that worried about Marvin McBride because they are producing. But overall, this is another one of those offenses where, like, if you don't have to watch the games, maybe don't.
Well, I certainly don't want to. And yeah, the rushing efficiency numbers still were terrible because this whole run game is a mess. That's all I'll say on the Cardinals. I don't want to talk about this team. Speaking of messy rushing efficiency numbers, I feel like a weekly submission here comes in from Jackson. Chase Brown, still in the league? Question mark. Can we just put Chase Brown in the coping corner so that we don't have to keep talking about him? I mean, it's not gonna, like, it's not happening with top unless there's a trade for a quarterback. I don't think it's not happening for Chase Brown. Even then, I'm not sure if it's going to happen. It's not going to happen for T. Higgins, even though we got the Garbo touchdown. It's like Jamar Chase. You're hoping for the big play, and that's it with the Bengals offense. Like, boom, changed my mind. I think Chase Brown makes sense as a coping corner candidate.
I keep holding on to like the total panic thing with him. I was the same way last week. I was the same way, I think, initially. But no, listen. I think I am willing to go coping corner here. Now, what I think is going to happen, though, is we have to account for the matchups that they've had, right? This has been a terrible run out. The Vikings, the Broncos, and the Lions in the 3 games with Jake Browning under center. Like, that is awful. Those are difficult matchups for a running back. Those are difficult matchups for an offense that's already struggling, for an offensive line that is underachieving. But it will get better schedule-wise eventually. It's not going to get better this week because they're going to play the Packers, but it will get better eventually, and I think he is going to have some games. But I'm with you that I think you hit it on the head at the top there. I don't want to talk about him anymore. And that's part of this, right? Like, we're sick of answering these questions. He is bad right now. He is not going to produce right now. I think there is some hope that later in the season when the matchups get easier, he'll get back to being more of like a low end RB2. But yeah, I'm with you. Let's put him in the coping corner. We're filling up that coping corner this week. But yeah, I think, yeah, okay, it's time. We should.
Yeah. Running back 33 in total fantasy points. He has fewer fantasy points than Rashad White, Kenneth Gainwell, Rico Dowdle, obviously. I mean, these are guys who haven't even started the whole season. So, yeah, like he's running back 37 in fantasy points per game. Like, if we want to be fair on the per game stuff here, yeah, it's a mess. And he wasn't
even
effective
though I don't think it's
even when Burrow
fault,
was there. Yeah,
even though I don't think it's his fault, I think it's the environment changed around him. We do have to factor in what people thought and what we thought he was going to be before the season versus what he is now. And that also contributes to him going to coping corner.
Let's talk about another disappointing running back situation from this past week. Jeff sends in, what the heck happened to Woody Marks? Was it just that the Baltimore Ravens are so vulnerable through the air, or are they going to keep giving Chubb the lead back role? This was a very disappointing rug pull here for Woody Marks, Boone, because typically it's this with the rookie running backs, right? Like, all right, the ascension, he lost work to Nick Chubb after seemingly taking the job last week. So what is your level of concern on Woody Marks? We were very excited about what we saw, both in the stat sheet and I think on film last week as well.
I wanted to ask you, I'm equally confused by this one, right? This looked like it was going to be a matchup where they were going to crush. They come out, they crush. And yet he ends up taking like a backseat. Not only to Nick Chubb, we saw Dameon Pierce got involved, 23% of the snaps for him, 7 carries for 21
was like
yards.
Garbage time.
I know, but like all these other guys were getting worked in. British Brooks got a couple carries. Like
I don't even know who that is.
Touches.
Who's British Brooks?
Exactly. That's a very good point. And yes, noted. I mean, Chubb leading the way in a game where they were just rolling. I guess you could make an argument that the coaching staff was just like, let him have his time here. This is a matchup that he can actually excel in. But overall, like, you wanted to see Marks come out, kill it as a runner in this game, and he didn't. Last week, we talked about how effective he was as a runner. We knew that he could be that pass-catching option. Now, could he add that? This week, he wasn't even like that effective on his touches. I don't know how much that contributed, like, in-game to them leaning more towards Chubb. Yeah. But overall, yeah, I think you nailed it. Like, a complete rug pull, but there was a reason why, like when Trey Benson got vaulted into the starting role for the Cardinals, I went out immediately, was like, okay, spend your fab on him. Who knew that he was going to get hurt? But he was the kind of player that I saw that potential ascension for him to be a fantasy difference maker. I didn't necessarily see it as much with Marks, and I didn't recommend the same kind of FOB bid on him and being as aggressive. I suggested more of like a 50% bid last week for him because there was a possibility that it was like this 1 week kind of thing. And yet, yeah, never saw it working out that way. Like never, not revisionist history at all here. Definitely did not see it going this way. Yeah. Thought at worst we would see him in a 50-50 committee with Chubb. And yet, yeah, it went back to Chubb being the lead guy there. So it's a really, really weird one. And we just got to hold and hope that at some point he eventually comes on again because, yeah, Chubb is not the answer there. We know that. But this was one of the weirdest outcomes of the weekend.
Definitely weird outcome and one that we just got wrong. And like that's going to happen when you're trying to predict an unpredictable sport here. We just got this one wrong and that stinks. And hopefully we see him. I wouldn't drop him, like rage drop him off this performance. I would try to keep him, and hopefully we see more of him going on. But another rookie running back here. This might be the last one we take, so we got to get to break here. But P-Town, obviously, I love this. Just Travion, obviously here from old P-Town sends this one in. You know, Boone, I mentioned coping corner for Travion Henderson last week. I think, though, the fact that unfortunately Antonio Gibson suffered a torn ACL and he's going to be out for the season, I do think that means we got to leave the light on for Travion Henderson. But like, can I just say this real quick? I know, and I'll toss it to you and get what your measure is on the coping corner. But the Travion Henderson bros have to get. We got to get a grip. Got to get a little serious here. Like the guy is not playing so well that he just needs to completely dust everybody else in the running back. Like Mike Vrabel keeps saying we need Ramondre Stevenson, and yeah, they kind of do. Like they need him to stop fumbling because they need him to be an effective back because it's not like Travion's just setting the world on fire. He is not getting a lot of yards. and he's not getting a lot of yards like after contact or yards per carry, despite the fact that he's getting a lot of the outside rushing attempts that you want to see. So that doesn't mean he stinks or he's going to be bad all year, but we've got to actually see it from TreVeyon Henderson before everybody on my Twitter timeline is just in a rage that he's not seeing the field.
Yeah, he doesn't look good. And because of that, I've shifted from being some panic before to now being total panic with him. But I totally agree with you that we can't go all the way. I would have listened to the Coping Corner argument if we didn't get the news that Antonio Gibson was out for the season with the ACL tear. Now he at least has a chance. They're going to have him involved. Let's see if he gets more touches, because it's not just about getting more opportunities, but like Gibson was getting like at least 6 touches a week for like the last month.
Yeah.
So there's actually some touches to go around there. And it's a weird one where like Ramondre can't even fumble this job away. And that makes me worried that the coaching staff just isn't seeing anything from Henderson. They have no faith in him whatsoever, because you would think if that was happening, we've seen it with previous coaching staffs where the fumbles happen and okay, you're done and we're moving on to the next guy. And yet they don't seem willing to do that at all here. So yeah, it's total panic. There's definitely some worry. It does not look like he's going to pay off what he initially was drafted to be. And yet, like you said, we're going to leave the light on here and see what he can do with a few more touches. And if eventually he pops off, but I don't have a ton of hope at this point.
Yeah. Mike Vrabel said today, we need to see more from him. We need to see more from him on kickoff returns, which is like, oh, that's definitely what these fantasy bros want to hear for TreVeyon Henderson. They want to see more from him as the kickoff returner. So I don't even know who their third string running back is now with Gibson out, but that guy will probably get more touches than TreVeyon Henderson, and the timeline will be ablaze for the next Patriots primetime game. But all right. So with that, we have 4 members of the Coping Corner after this week's show. We've got Calvin Ridley and Isaiah Pacheco still holding it down. Ridley, though, is kind of putting us on notice. TJ Hawkinson and Chase Brown join them in the Coping Corner after today's show. We had a lot more submissions, but kind of wanted to dive deeper on those. And it was a weird week for Panic. There wasn't a ton of, big bust performances by big names necessarily. So I think we covered all the important ones. So with that, we are going to take our next break here. When we come back, we have Justin Boone's waiver wire selections for you to make in your leagues out there. We will get into that right after this. All right, we are back. It's time to dive into the waiver wire here. As always, with these segments, we're going to go through position by position. So Boone, let's get it started with the quarterbacks here this week.
All right. The first quarterback, and I will admit this is not a great week for quarterbacks, but Sam Darnold is playing very well. And if you follow my work, I had my doubts about his ability to leave that environment in Minnesota, to leave Kevin O'Connell, and to actually still be good, not only for fantasy, but in real life as well. Fortunately, he's linked up with another strong play caller in Clint Kubiak. And that duo is settling into like a pretty good rhythm here, Harmon, right? Like he is fresh off his best game of the year. 341 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. That shootout loss to the Bucs. It was his second top 10 fantasy finish through 5 weeks. He's also near the top of the league in QBR in 2025. Seattle has a superstar number 1 receiver. We're seeing JSN emerge like that. Cooper Kupp still a reliable vet, but they have a bunch of like emerging young talent like Torrey Horton and AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo, guys that I think could continue to come on and develop. So I think it could even get better for this offense this year. So next up, a Jags defense that's going to be on a short week coming off Monday Night Football. I would consider Darnold a low-end QB1, high-end QB2 for that game. And I think he's going to be in that range a bunch moving forward. So he's somebody that people could pick up. Mac Jones, we'll see if Brock Purdy can come back this week or not. Mac Jones just 4% rostered right now. Gets a matchup with the Bucs, and he's looked pretty good in this Shanahan system, right? Like you got to have some questions about his previous coaches and what they did with him, because he joined San Francisco, had a little bit of time there. He gets out there and he's producing, and it's not like he's producing with George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk and all these top names. He was producing last week with Kendrick Bourne, who we'll talk about a little more in a second, but some of like the depth pieces in this offense, and still getting it done. He's been a top 15 fantasy quarterback in all 3 of his starts this year, top 10 in 2 of them, including this past game where playing on a short week, playing at less than 100%, playing with the banged up receiving core, and still gets it done. 342 yards and 2 touchdowns. So if Purdy can't go in week 6, Mac Jones against the pass funnel Bucs defense, I definitely think you could do worse than that. So I would look to him as a streamer. of course, as long as he's healthy enough to get out there, because he seemed like he was going through it last week too, Harmon. He was a little banged up and trying to make it through that game. So as long as he's fine, we're going to get him out there as a streamer if Purdy can't go. But I will also say there's no quarterback controversy here. Even he said it, right, Mac Jones?
Yeah,
he is the backup. Purdy is the
stupid.
starter. When Purdy returns, he is going to take this job. But in the meantime, Mac Jones can be used for fantasy. And for Dynasty, I think that he's almost like reviving his value. Like, could he be the next Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield type guy where he gets an opportunity next year in the coming years here to get another shot at starting somewhere? I definitely think he could, right, Harmon?
Yeah, listen, and I'm going to say this, I'm always on the wrong side of history with these quarterback like reclamation projects. I get that. But Mac Jones is definitely not as talented as like Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and these guys. They obviously were higher draft picks. They were in different tiers of prospects. But you can also say that and also recognize that Mac Jones was absolutely set up to fail in New England. I mean, you mentioned his former coaches. One of his former coaches is more concerned with what his college program is tweeting out right now than he is about football. So not so great for former Mac Jones coaches. The other one, Doug Peterson, he's on a golf course somewhere right now. So yeah, definitely. He's a great fit in this offense though. And I think his production will continue to be there. But the thing is though, it's a lot like the Jimmy G stuff where it's, hey, get the ball out quick. Just trust the process, trust the plays. Kyle Shanahan's going to get you in the right direction. As long as you can be that joystick, you're going to be a productive quarterback in this system.
All right, let's keep it going here. And I say this every week, but there's always streaming options out there, right? They're riskier streaming options, but there's always streaming options at quarterback. And this week, I mean, Jackson Darter, we've talked about before. He's got a tough matchup against the Eagles, but with that rushing ability, you could consider him. Bryce Young's got an easy matchup, so maybe you give him a shot this week, even though he hasn't done much this year. Tua, Michael Penix, like there's those kind of names, right? But I think we should talk about Dillon Gabriel after what he did in his first start, right? He's on the road. He's in another continent. He is a rookie. And yet he comes out against a Brian Flores defense that had a week to get acclimated with the jet lag and everything. They stayed over there, and still Gabriel comes out, puts up 190 yards and 2 touchdowns. I thought he was going to run a little more. Like, he had 5 rushing yards. He had a couple college seasons where he was over 300 rushing yards. So I thought that was going to be part of his game. Maybe that will be eventually here, but he certainly did enough to warrant maintaining that starting job, getting another opportunity. And now coming up here is the Steelers, the Dolphins, the Patriots, then a bye, the Jets, the Ravens. Like, that's not that bad of a schedule, right? Like, that's the next 6 weeks for the Browns, not just him, but like Quinshon Judkins. Like, give me Quinshon Judkins in those games. Quinshon Judkins looks fantastic, not to take a complete, sidetrack there, but this Browns offense could be a little more productive in those outings. And I think Gabriel, despite the fact that, yes, everyone wanted to talk about how tiny he looked next to Carson Wentz, we knew that was part of this, but still, he got on the field and he came through. There's another, you can't see it behind me, but the box of Flutie Flakes is right here, right? There's another tiny quarterback that had a lot of success in the NFL. So it's not insane, geez. I think, at this point to invest in this Browns offense. And Gabriel, for fantasy, we're just talking about like a bye week replacement guy, an injury replacement guy, or a super flex option here. But I think he's somebody that now is on the radar.
Yeah. And Ray and I's theory from the show in which it was percolating that he was going to end up starting Dillon Gabriel proved true. Like, he did help the run game. They were 8th in rushing success rate last week. They were 5th in EPA per rush on their running back runs. So whether he actually does run the ball or not, he is more of a mobile threat than Joe Flacco, which definitely helps Quinshon Judkins, which definitely helps that run game overall. So no question that I think Dillon Gabriel showed pretty well for his first NFL start, and we'll continue to kind of track and see what he can do in that spot. But let's get to the running backs here, because there's a lot of interesting options to go through on your list.
This is the exciting one. This is the one where we're going to spend most of our time talking about waiver wire ads this week. And the first one is a guy who I mentioned in that deep stashes column. Harmon, I keep telling everybody, go read that column. It comes out on Thursday. I've hit on a ton of these guys.
We're reading again in 2025, people.
Exactly.
Please.
And this is a very helpful article, a version of it that I used to do a long time ago. People loved it. It was like a tiny part of a longer column that I did. Now we've blown it out into a big column. Michael Carter was the main guy that I talked about last week, and that was when we were just finding out that Trey Benson was hurt and that he was going to miss time. And there was a lot of signs telling us that Michael Carter was going to be the lead back. And that's exactly what happened, right? He comes out in this game, handles 58% of the Cardinals' backfield snaps, delivers 51 rushing yards and a touchdown on 18 carries, another 22 yards on 5 receptions, which is certainly notable. You have Amari Demercado, who looks good in his opportunities, but man, that embarrassing fumble at the goal line. We saw Gannon go nuts on him on the sidelines. That is certainly not going to earn him any more work. So I think it's going to be Michael Carter continuing to get the main job there. We'll have Bam Knight working in. He worked a little bit in this game as well, but the matchups are going to get tougher than the Titans. So we continue to look at Michael Carter as an RB3 flex option, and that's going to be the way it is until Benson comes back. Kendre Miller, this is not the first time he's been mentioned in this spot. Kendre Miller coming on. We mentioned him earlier in the show as well. Unlike all the rest of these ball carriers, Miller isn't just automatically vaulting into the starting lineup because of an injury, but he's a guy who is earning more playing time, and he's doing it based on talent. He looks good with the opportunities. 23 years old, finally staying healthy. That was the thing. We knew he had the ability, but he couldn't stay healthy in the first couple years of his career. Now he is, and he has the skills to be a lead back in the NFL. I'm convinced of it. His involvement, in the running game is really where he's getting his main work. He's not really getting involved in the passing game yet. Maybe that could come down the road, especially if Alvin Kamara eventually gets moved. But you talked about wanting to see that upward trend with, younger players. We're seeing it here. 15% of the snaps in week 1, 16%, 27%, 31, 39. He's had 11 touches each of the last 2 weeks. I really, really like this guy as a pickup who I think could take on more work as the season goes along for a variety of reasons, like we talked about earlier, an Alvin Kamara trade, an Alvin Kamara injury, or just because this team starts to shift towards the younger players. So Kendre Miller, definitely somebody that we like here. Then we can go back and talk about the Omarion Hampton injury and who is going to get the opportunities here. And I'll try not to regurgitate everything we said off the top, but Kamani Vidal and Hassan Haskins, they are rostered in 0% and 1% of fantasy leagues. So there's going to be a lot of people out there trying to get these guys this week. And I think Hampton being out is going to put, in my mind, Vidal as the number one option in this backfield. But how excited can we actually get about these guys behind an offensive line that is just so banged up right now? Well, for 1 week against the Dolphins, we can get like a little bit excited. Maybe we can let ourselves kind of get excited because we just saw Rico Dowdle blow up against that defense. The Dolphins have the vibe of a team that is just totally giving up on the season. I think we're going to see these backs put up some fantasy stats, but it's going to be a committee looking at Kamani Vidal as an RB3 flex, looking at Hassan Haskins as a flex option. There's some risk involved here because we don't know how it's going to go, and it could be decided based on a hot hand situation during the game. But those guys need to be rostered now. They're going to have some fantasy value, and they can get right into your lineup. Kenneth Gainwell, we saw Jaylen Warren back out at practice, so I warned people don't get too excited about that last Kenneth Gainwell game before his bye. He is going to come out. He is just a one injury away guy, but at least now we've seen what the ceiling is. He can do a very good Jaylen Warren impression, so he's somebody that you want to go roster just in case Warren can't get it done this week, can't get healthy, or he gets hurt again. You want to have Kenneth Gainwell on your team. And then a stash option, a guy who's out there in 95% of leagues, Isaiah Davis on the Jets. We got the news that Braylon Allen is going to be out for 8 to 12 weeks. That puts Davis in the number 2 back role for New York. And now he's just one injury away. If Breece Hall goes down at some point, we're going to see Isaiah Davis be the lead back in that backfield. So he played 40% of the snaps this week. Didn't turn it into too much. 4 touches for 33 yards. If Breece Hall gets hurt, though, I think Davis has enough talent that he's going to be somebody that would be leading this waiver wire section. So go get him before anything like that happens.
Yeah, and the Jets offensive line is still a unit that I think has played okay this season. Okay to good, honestly, at times. So Isaiah Davis, if he ever happens to end up in that starting job, and it seems like they like him. Seems like this coaching staff is into him. I love him as a stash candidate here. And yeah, Kendre Miller, like I'll just echo what you said here, man. I mean, the upward trajectory is there. I think he's a talented player. Got a fresh start under a new coaching staff. The last coaching staff, Dennis Allen, those guys just hated him. And for whatever reason, it just seemed like it was a constant negative feedback loop for Kendre Miller. Obviously, injuries, I think, were a part of that, just general unreliability. Maybe he didn't know how to be a pro. He's in his third season now. He looks great out there. Like, I think there are times he looks like better than Alvin Kamara from an efficiency perspective. He's definitely looked better. So yeah, I mean, to me, it would behoove the Saints to say, okay, Alvin Kamara, like, I get it. You want to live in New Orleans. New Orleans is a kick-ass place. That's cool, but we also need to recoup a draft pick. And don't you want to go win some games again in your career here? We're not going anywhere. Just because Kendrick Miller's shown like he could be maybe a part of their future here. So, yeah, I think he needs to be much higher rostered just on the off chance that Kamara ends up traded or gets banged up, and then Kendrick Miller is one injury away.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think this is, if you are going to go out and spend a little fab budget this week, it's the running backs that you're going to want to spend it on, because these guys are going to get opportunities, and because a guy like Kendrick Miller could potentially change your season if he does get that starting job.
All right, we are going to take another quick break here. When we come back, we run through the pass catchers on Justin Boone's waiver wire list, including a tight end that he needs to bump up here. Okay, he's not high enough on this tight end that I'm going to be talking about here in just a minute. We will get into that right after this. All right, we're back. Let's talk through some pass catchers to grab on the waiver wire here heading into week 6. Boone, let's talk through some wide receivers here.
All right, so there's always like the flex option receivers out there. There's not really anybody on the waiver wire this week that's going to completely change your season. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about the bids you're going to put down. You know, somebody like Luther Burden, who I brought up before on the Bears, a rookie, continues to be very intriguing in my mind. I think he's someone that could get that like post-bye rookie bump kind of coming out of this bye here. So keep him in mind as like a deeper stash. But the first guy I'm going to highlight is Romeo Doubs on the Packers, and he's right up at that 50% rostered cutoff. So we won't spend too much time on him, but remember, he is coming off a bye. Before the bye, he had that crazy game with the Cowboys, had a huge game with 3 touchdowns. That's the kind of spiked weeks that he offers. It might be volatile because he'll have some down games as well, but he's got a shot here with Jaden Reed out for a long time. He has a shot to be the number 1 receiver in that offense. So keep him in mind. If he's available, he would be the number 1 wide receiver add this week. Kendrick Bourne, I said I was going to bring him up. Now let's talk about him here. Going against the Bucs this week, 4% rostered, so he's available almost everywhere. We all just saw in an island game him absolutely go off. 10 catches, 142 yards against the Rams. He served as the 49ers number 1 receiver. The question is, will he have to serve as the 49ers number 1 receiver again? We don't know right now. Yeah. It's possible that we could see Juwan Jennings come back. It's possible Ricky Pearsall could come back this week. So we're going to have to monitor those guys. If they're not available, or even if just one of them are available, then Bourne could get into your lineup as that flex option. If both those guys are out, then we're talking about a wide receiver 3 who has some upside like we saw last week. So keep Kendrick Bourne in mind. And then, I mean, there's boomer bust guys like Trey Tucker, Troy Franklin. We've talked about these guys in the past, right? Same type of player. They can have these big games. I mean, in the break, Harmon, we were talking, you were saying, just play the number 2 receiver against the Jets. And yeah, who's the number 2 receiver against them this week? It is Troy Franklin. We are going to see him potentially have a big game here. He scored over 8 fantasy points in 4 of his 5 games this year. Sadly, I mean, they went back to having more of a rotation since then. We were hoping that he was going to continue in that big role. He has not. They've gone back to more of a rotation, but still, we know what he can do. We've seen some ceiling games from him. So I think you could do worse, you know, for a bye or an injury fill-in type player. I think he's a guy you could look to as a flex. Darnell Mooney against the Bills. He's 33% rostered, hurt his hamstring in week 4. The Falcons went on bye. Nobody's talking about him. The reports I saw said that, you know, he isn't likely to miss any games. So it looks like he's going to be able to come back and play this week. And this has just been a weird season for him. He had an injury before the year. Yeah. Then he had this injury. Hasn't really had a chance to get going, but we've seen this guy produce before. He can certainly get it done. He could be a wide receiver 3 flex when he's healthy, when that offense is humming. So you go pick him up. You don't start him this week. You put him on your bench. You see if he can get back to that shape, that form that he's been in the past. I think he definitely can. And then for a stash, I'm going deep on this one. Ryan Flournoy on the Cowboys. Guess what? He is 0% rostered, Harmon. Big shock there.
Oh, no way.
Prior to last week, hadn't really done much, but CeeDee Lamb was out. Kevontae Turpin was out. And what happened? Flournoy, a season high 57% of the snaps, 6 catches for 119 yards on 9 targets. This is somebody who I have been stashing on a ton of dynasty teams, and I eventually dropped him because he wasn't getting any opportunity last year and over the offseason. And now I'm regretting that. It's amazing what like a couple injuries can do for a guy's opportunity. He is right back out there as someone who's contributing in this offense. So I think people could go out and stash him. It's a risky play if you want to put him in your lineup and chase those numbers from last week, but you could grab him right now, play him as a risky flex, or sit on him and see if he can grow into a bigger role if CeeDee Lamb is going to be out here for another couple weeks, if Kevontae Turpin's going to be out for another couple weeks.
Sounds like CeeDee Lamb and Kevontae Turpin will be back pretty soon, and I just don't see how Ryan Flournoy has a role in that regard.
I like that you hesitated before saying his last name. Like that's how Ryan Flournoy. That's how unknown he is. That's how much of a stash this is. If you're just like, Ryan, what? How do you pronounce this? Flournoy? Oh, okay.
No, that is strictly being me being mean to Colin when I mispronounce his name like that. Okay, so number 2 receivers that are going to play the Jets here pretty soon. Troy Franklin this week, because like I said, just whoever is the number 2 cornerback, not Sauce Gardner for the Jets, has been a train wreck. They can't cover anybody in man coverage right now. You got Troy Franklin this coming week. You got Xavier Legette week 7. Oh, maybe that's Jalen Coker week 7. Back in our lives, baby. Whew, that got me excited.
There we go.
That makes me feel happy to be alive. Week 8, T. Higgins. Huh? Maybe Russell Wilson's the quarterback there. Then the Jets go on bye. Then we got week 10, the Browns. I guess that's Isaiah Bond. We got okay, this is actually getting very unexciting. So I'm going to stop this whole bit here.
But for the next little stretch.
maybe make it a prop bet type thing. Okay, with that, let's get to some tight ends here because there's some interesting names on this list here, Boone.
Yeah, this first guy is right up there with the top pickups this week. Mason Taylor on the Jets. Again, if you aren't checking out that deep stashes column, he was mentioned in it already. You could have already had him on your roster, but 13 targets in his previous 2 outings, catching 9 of them for 83 yards, 5 for 65 stat line in week 4. That made him the tight end 14.5 PPR, the tight end 11 in full PPR. And then guess what? He comes out this week, has a huge game, 12 targets, 9 catches, 67 yards. There are few tight ends that are getting that kind of opportunity, but what do we always look for, Harmon? We look for those tight ends who could potentially be the de facto number 2 receiver in their offense. He is that. There is no doubt that Taylor is that. They want him to be that. He's a rookie who's ascending. He is somebody that you want to be aggressive. You want to get him on your team if you need tight end help. And if you have one of those like tight ends you're not totally sure about, you pick him up and you trade that tight end away and you roll with Taylor because I think he is going to be a low-end tight end 1 the rest of the way. Brenton Strange. So he plays in the Monday night game. We're recording before the Monday night game. So this is that spot, Harmon, where I am totally just going to throw it. And
2
say,
touchdowns incoming.
He's definitely not going to have a huge game, or he is going to have a huge game, and the opposite will always happen. I don't want to put the tight end curse on him. And this one, I'm saying it's a positive. I'm saying you should pick him up. So maybe it's like a negative this time, right? I'm suggesting you should pick him up and he's going to go out there and put up no catches tonight or something like that. But assuming he has another one of these decent games, he's had at least 45 yards in 3 of his 4 outings. So we'll see what he does in tonight's contest, but he's a guy you could pick up and use him as a streamer. Theo Johnson on the Giants, 12 targets in Jackson Dart's 2 starts, 9 catches, only 50 yards total, but 3 touchdowns in those 2 games. And Neighbors is out. Darius Slayton's banged up with a hamstring injury. They need him to step up. He might be another guy who could potentially be the de facto number 2 receiver in his offense. So he's a streamer for sure. And then somebody to stash very, very deep here. Colston Loveland. Don't forget about him. He's coming off his bye. Could get that, post-bye rookie bump. He's somebody to stash and see what he does coming off the bye.
Love that call on Colston Loveland. Really interested to see what the Bears look like out the bye. The guy I was talking about here that you are disrespecting, you are underranked here, is your deep sleeper, which is A.J. Barner. I'll just spoil it for the people here. A.J. Barner is kind of a stud, bro. He looks like an awesome tight end. He can block. He's a good inline player. 63% route participation the last 2 weeks, 3 touchdowns. Like, tell me why A.J. Barner should not be higher ranked here, Boone.
He's looking good. I still think that Elijah Arroyo is going to come on and get involved. But yeah, I'm mentioning him here for a reason. He's a deep sleeper you could grab, throw on your roster, and could be a good play for you.
I love it. Yeah, I just think he's playing really well, and I like the Seahawks offense. So that is going to do it for today's show. Boone, great job by you, buddy. Waiver wires, panic. The coping corner gets bigger and bigger. It's only going to get bigger from here, pal. That's how this goes. So shout out to you for another great show. We will be back on Tuesday. Ray Garvin joins me for another edition of the Data Dump as we give you 10 stats you need to know heading into week 6. That's going to be live right here, 5 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. Until then, we are out.